In this lesson, we're going to go over the most frequently tested and highest yielding areas of intestacy in trusts and estates on the bar exam in 60 minutes or less. Or in other words, we're going to go over the absolute must-know stuff in intestacy for the bar exam, which historically, if we look at the data, is going to be intestate succession, the inheritance rights of non-marital, half-blood, and adopted children, advancements, simultaneous death, and ultimately how we allocate shares when a child predeceases a parent who later dies intestate, right? We'll need to know how to allocate those shares of the estate under 3 different approaches. We're going to have strict per stirpes, modern per stirpes, and per capita at each generation. But this is the most frequently tested and highest yielding areas of intestacy. So this is what I'm going to try to break down as best I possibly can over the next 60 minutes or so. But with that, we'll just set the timer to 1 hour. Ready, set, go. So the clock has officially started. We can jump right into intestacy. Right, so big picture, in trusts and estates, the main idea here is we're trying to decide where property goes when a person dies, right? We understand that a person, usually when they die, they're going to have some kind of personal property. Often they're going to have real property. The question is, where does all that property go, right? They can't take it with them when they die. We understand this. It's going to have to be distributed amongst the living, right? So how do we determine where this property goes? And we'll see, right? It really depends. And our first question, though, kind of the gateway issue, is going to be whether the decedent left behind some sort of document, maybe like a will or a trust, that has told, right, where the property should go, or whether they died without one of these documents. Well, we would say dying intestate, right? If a person dies without a will, right, dies without a trust, dies without something that directs where their property should go at death, we say that person has died intestate, right? And the laws of intestate succession and the applicable jurisdiction are going to determine where that property passes, right? So another way to think about this is the default rules are intestacy statutes. When a person dies, their property is passing by whatever the applicable jurisdiction's intestacy law says that property is going to pass, right? Unless they have some sort of will or trust that says otherwise. And we're going to get to wills and trusts later. But for right now, let's focus on the default, right? Any property that does not pass by will upon the decedent's death will be distributed according to applicable intestacy statutes. Right, so there's a couple things to recognize here before we just jump right into it, and it's mostly jurisdictional issues. Right, number one, it's important to recognize that from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, there's going to be a lot of variance in how intestacy laws and intestate succession laws really operate and work, right? Since we have so much variance, right, what we're going to focus on is kind of the majority approaches and then some modifications under the UPC. Right, so we're going to kind of lay out how most states handle this, how most states handle intestate succession, right? Property that's not passing by a will or trust, right? Some other document, basically where state law is deciding where the property is passing at a person's death. We're going to focus on kind of what most states do. Now, it's important to recognize on the bar exam, right, they might modify some of the things we're going to talk about here. They might give you actual intestacy statutes, right? Usually it'll be more towards the call of the question. They'll say this state, state A has adopted this intestacy statute, right? And then you just do whatever they give you, right? Obviously, if you see something on the bar exam that has modified something that we're going to talk about here, you apply the law that you've been given in the fact pattern, right? But most of the time, we're going to see law that looks very similar, even what the bar examiners are giving us, to what we see up here on the board, right? The other thing to think about from a jurisdictional perspective is, okay, well, what jurisdiction applies, right? Or the law in what jurisdiction applies. And this is something we could sometimes see. It's important to recognize that there is a distinction made jurisdictionally between personal property and real property, right? We're going to say that when a decedent dies, when a person dies, their personal property is going to pass based on the law of the state where that decedent was domiciled at the time of death, where real property is going to be governed by the law in the jurisdiction where that real property is located. Right, so imagine that a person is domiciled in the state of New York and they die, right? And say that they have a vacation home in the state of Florida, right? Well, all of their personal property is going to be governed by the state law of New York, right? Where their personal property gets distributed is going to be governed by the intestacy statutes of the state of New York, right? Because that's where they were domiciled at the time of their death. But remember, they have that vacation home, that real property located in Florida. Well, that property, because it's real property, it's land, right, it's going to be governed by the state in which it's located, the intestacy law in the state in which that real property is located, which would be the state of Florida, right? So that decedent, their personal property governed by the intestacy law of New York, their real property governed by the intestacy law of the state of Florida. Right, of course, on the bar exam, it would be state A, state B, right? They don't give you actual state names. For the most part, you're going to have, you know, this was located in state A, this happened in state B, this is the intestacy law of state A, this is the intestacy law of state B. That's how you deal with that. Right, personal property, it's domicile at the time of death. Real property, it's the jurisdiction where the real property is physically situated, where it's located. Okay, so that's how you determine the applicable intestacy statute. Right, but that is our jurisdictional perspective. We can move into the actual how the intestacy statutes generally work in most states. Right, so I've found the best thing to do on the bar exam with these types of fact patterns is usually just trying to bucket the fact pattern based into the right category, based on whether the decedent has a surviving spouse and whether the decedent has surviving children, right, or surviving descendants, right? And when we say the word descendants, for right now, assume that descendants really refers to biological bloodlines, right? The children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, right? A person's children, a person's grandchildren, a person's great-grandchildren, all the way down the bloodline is their descendants, right? And what we kind of want to do, probably step one, I found, and there's multiple approaches to doing this, but what I found to kind of be the best is to ask, number one, does the decedent have a surviving spouse? Number two, does the decedent have surviving descendants? And based on the answers to those questions, you can bucket your fact pattern into one of four categories. Once you do that, it's going to kind of tell you which direction to go. So if you're yes, yes, if you're no, no, if you're yes, no, no, yes, right, that's going to kind of tell you which category we're in. Category A, category B, C, D, and then from there, you'll kind of know what the rules are in most states. Okay, so let's start with yes, no, right? If the decedent is survived by a spouse and no descendants, right? So our decedent dies. Of course, the decedent, if you're wondering, I know I keep just saying decedent, that's simply the person who dies, right? That's the person who has died, and we're trying to determine where their property goes, right? They're kind of the subject of the fact pattern, right? That's the person who has died, and we're trying to determine where their property goes. That's who the decedent is, right? So if the decedent is survived by a spouse and no children, the surviving spouse will inherit the entire estate. That's really easy, right? In most states, if the decedent is survived by a spouse and no descendants, no children, no grandchildren, right? No great-grandchildren, the surviving spouse inherits the entire estate, right? Pretty straightforward. So that would be a yes-no category. Next, we have yes, yes. What happens if the decedent is survived by a spouse and is survived by descendants, right? They have children or something like that, right? Well, the surviving spouse in most states will inherit 1/2 or 1/3 of the decedent's estate, with the surviving descendants inheriting the rest. Right now, in some states and the Uniform Probate Code, which we call the UPC, the surviving spouse will inherit the entire estate if all the descendants are descendants of the surviving spouse, right? So basically, if the surviving spouse, right, has children, that are not the descendants of the decedent, right? Basically, this would be the decedent's stepchildren. Then the surviving spouse inherits the entire estate. Now, that's only if all the descendants are the descendants of the surviving spouse. Of course, if the decedent has descendants, well, then the decedent's descendants are going to get a share, right? Then we go back to kind of our original rule, right? The decedent will, or the descendants will inherit the remainder after the surviving spouse gets 1/2 or 1/3, right? So under the UPC and this approach, the surviving spouse will inherit the entire estate if all the descendants are descendants of the surviving spouse. So basically, in this fact pattern, we would need to see that the decedent has none of his own descendants, has none of his own children. He only has stepchildren. In that case, the stepchildren aren't going to inherit. The spouse, the surviving spouse, gets the entire estate under the UPC approach. Now, of course, the UPC has some statutory exceptions and modifications in there. Usually, if the estate is really large or really small, there could be some other approaches here, and we'll put that below the video. But big picture, what you really need to recognize going into the bar exam is kind of this distinction between stepchildren for the UPC in some states. In most states, it's as simple as, look, the decedent, if the decedent is survived by a spouse and descendants, the surviving spouse gets either 1/2 or 1/3, and the rest of the estate is split up between the surviving descendants, right? In some states in the UPC, there's some fine tuning added to this where we say, hey, look though, if the surviving spouse, right, if all of the descendants are descendants of the surviving spouse, then the surviving spouse inherits the whole estate. Basically, again, if the decedent has stepchildren and none of his own children, decedent has none of his own biological descendants, only has stepchildren with his spouse, then the surviving spouse under this approach gets the whole estate. Right now, we'll see that you could have some rare situations where we could have adoption, right? Say a person legally adopts their stepchild. Well, that could be different. We'll talk about that in a second when we get to the inheritance rights of adopted children. But our starting point rule, we're kind of thinking biological descendants first, right? But we'll see when we get to adopted children, legally adopted children for the most part have the same rights as biological children. Right? Just something to keep in the back of our mind here. Next, we can get to category C though. This is no, yes, right? In most states, if the decedent is not survived by a spouse and is survived by descendants, the decedent's descendants will inherit the entire estate equally, right? No problem there, right? Again, if the decedent is not survived by a spouse and is survived by descendants, usually the children, right? The decedent's children will inherit the entire estate equally, right? So our no, yes situation. Finally, our fourth category, we've already gone over, right? Yes, no, right? No, we've gone over, I'm sorry. Yes, no, yes, yes, no, yes. That leaves us with no, no, right? What happens if the decedent is not survived by either a spouse or descendants, right? We don't have a spouse, we don't have children, we don't have grandchildren, right? What happens here? Well, we go up. We go to the parents, right? The decedent's surviving parents inherit the entire estate equally. What if there's no parents? If there are no surviving parents, the descendants of the decedent's parents will inherit the entire estate equally, right? This would be the decedent's brothers and sisters, right? The descendants of the brothers and sisters are going to be the decedent's nieces and nephews, right? So this is where we start to get into the table of consanguinity, when we're getting to really, remote relatives of the decedent, right? But the general idea, big picture, is we start with the spouse, right? We go spouse, and then we go down. We go descendants of the decedent. So we go spouse, then we go down the bloodline, decedent's bloodline of the descendants, right? If it's no to those, we go back up. We go to the parents, right? If there's no parents, we work down. Who are the parents' descendants? So we go to the decedent's parents, and then we work down. Well, the descendants of the parents are going to be the decedent's brothers and sisters, right? And we work down again. If there's no brothers and sisters who have survived, who are the daughters and sons of those brothers and sisters, right? Those are going to be the decedents, nieces and nephews, right? And you just keep going down the list. If you go all the way down that bloodline and there's nothing there, no survivors, you go back up to the top, right? This is where you would now go to the grandparents, right? The decedents' grandparents, and you work down, right? So on and so forth. And this is the table of consanguinity, and we'll put a link below so you can see what tables of consanguinity look like. You know, if you just Google it, you're going to see 100 different charts. You know, that might help just to pick an illustration of it you like that resonates with you, right? But that's where we're getting really remote. Those are situations where you're getting really remote relatives from the decedent, right? Most of the time on the bar exam, we're thinking about the most frequently tested kind of fact patterns, you're going to be able to neatly kind of put it in one bucket. Now, if you get into this D bucket, category D, the no bucket, this is where things can start to get to remote places from the decedent, but usually, right, there's going to be a parent, there's going to be a brother, a sister, a niece, a nephew that you can get to. But if you get all the way down and you can't, you just go back up to the grandparents and you work down from the grandparents' descendants. Nothing there, you go up to the great-grandparents and you work down. And that's where you can start to get into, you know, second cousins, right, and things like that. First cousins, once removed, first cousins, twice removed, and you go back up, that's where you can get to the great-grandparents, great-aunts, great-uncles, and all the way down to like second cousins and things like that, where we're getting really far removed. Again, on the bar exam, you know, it's something to be aware of, and we'll put links to the table of consanguinity. You know, everything is fair game, but based on what we've seen tested, these 4 categories I would have down first before you really start diving into the table of consanguinity. Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Bar Blitz video series. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire Bar Blitz video library, which includes coverage of the most frequently tested and highest yielding areas of law in each bar exam subject, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled in Studicata Bar Review. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com.